Thank you so much for being with us today, Audrey.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So,
It's my pleasure to be here.
yeah,
Great.
we are very excited to have you here. I'm very excited that you're able to participate in our exhibition and program. So, thank you for that. And
Thank
we
you.
want to get to know you a little bit better. And
Sure.
with that, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Anything that you want to share with us?
Let's see. My name is Audrey Augun. I live in New Hampshire, and I've been a fiber artist probably since the 80s, which is a long time now. I come from a family of women who worked either in the factories of New England making clothes, and I'm of Lithuanian background, and there's a huge fiber tradition in Lithuania. And both of my grandmothers were excellent at crochet, needlework, you name it.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, I went to a place in Vermont that was sponsored by the Society of Vermont Craftsmen. And I took a quilting class and I thought, wow, this is really nice.
Yeah.
And, but while I did traditional quilting, which is working from patterns, um, I wanted to break out and do my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there was a growing tradition of what we call the art quilt.
Okay.
Art quilts are original in design. They're usually not from a they're not never from a pattern unless you want to introduce maybe a traditional pattern into your quilt. They're the thing that they both share is that it's three layers: a backing, a back, and then the top.
Mm-hmm.
So over the years, I was influenced by a lot of really good quilters, art quilters, textile artists. Yvonne Porcella, Nancy Crow. I remember being in Washington, D.C. and walking into the Renwick, and there was a huge exhibit of Nancy Crow's work. And, you just stood there with your mouth open. And then, there have been other seminal quilt shows, the Quilters of Gee's Bend, who are African American women in the South, in a geography called Gee's Bend, a town. And the work that they did is just mind blowing.
Yeah.
And then there are business people like, I don't know if you remember Esprit, the clothing line. Doug Tompkins, who was the head of Esprit, went to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, buying Amish quilts, which if you look at them today are modern in their design. They're not patterned, they're one color, or a variety, solid colors, and then hand quilted. And he hung them all throughout the Esprit corporate headquarters.
Oh, wow.
And then the Esprit clothing line, the designers were influenced by those colors and the patterns. Esprit is no longer a company, but the collection is now with the Lancaster Historical Society in Pennsylvania. So, and then, groups came together. There were people, Ruth McDowell is one of the leaders. She passed recently, but her quilts are just phenomenal. So it went from there. And, you take everything you learn and you put it into your work in the sense of it's not just fiber and thread. It could be ink pencils. It could be paint. It could be stencil. Whatever works for you to get your idea across to your audience. And that for me, in retrospect, as I look back, I wasn't aware of this at the time, but for me, it's environmental issues, be it ocean, wildlife, or just pollution, things like that. And I just want people to look at the quilt and, I want them to be hit in the heart. Mm-hmm. So that on their own, they will be moved to take action and do things. Mm-hmm. I remember growing up as a child in Boston, And we were 2 blocks from the beach. And at that time, as kids, 7, 8 years old, without our parents who were all at work,
Yeah.
we would run to the beach. You could get on the bus, go into town, put a nickel into the, or go to the beach, take your blanket and have fun. And I remember swimming. It was just great. But then all of a sudden, there were jellyfish. I mean, you couldn't swim through the jellyfish. That was the mass that you saw in the water. And I was a kid. I had why is this happening?
You're like, I want to swim.
Right. I, are they going to sting me or is it going to hurt? And as the tide would go out, you couldn't even walk down to low tide because they'd be resting on the shoreline. And, as kids, the boys would pick up the stuff and start throwing the jellyfish at each other. But in looking back, I realized they were lion's mane jellyfish due to the warming temperature of Boston Harbor. And it made it difficult for everybody. And then there was the trash. For example, I would walk along the shore and I would find Tampax. And until Boston Harbor cleaned itself up in intervening years and fixed their sewage system, it was disgusting. So now I think it's better. I don't live near there anymore. I visit, but it's probably better. But you see it in New England. We have a lot of lakes and rivers, and where we are on the globe, the water pours down into Lowell, into Boston Harbor. It's like a drainage system. So we have to be careful of, the cleanliness of our lakes and rivers because that's going to affect the ocean.
Yeah, flush all the way down.
Yeah. And, if we don't do something about it, and I like being on the water. I like being near the water. I'm not a diver. My husband and daughter are certified divers, but even traveling with them, and I would snorkel and, I would see things, look at the reefs when you go to the Caribbean. I remember Cayman Brac. We were on Cayman Brac, and I'm walking along the water, and I see this jellyfish, and he was multicolored, just beautiful. And I thought to myself, oh, I won't touch him. I'll leave him alone. I was talking to somebody, and they said, oh, that's a deadly sting. We don't usually get them here. They're coming north. And I was
poke it.
Glad I didn't touch you. Glad I left you alone. But so I really like, because I grew up on the water, I could see the water from our living room window. I've always associated myself with the seaside. And that's why when your call for entry came out, I thought, oh, this is great. I can do this. Yeah. I've been doing this. So I work in a series, and I've been doing a lot of ocean quilts, but I also do like this one behind me, this one here. This is of New York. And if you get up close to it, it's called Where Can We Live? And it has rabbits all over it. And it's basically a message about, well, you can build a lot of things, but if you don't have places for people and animals, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And animal habitat to me is where I am. It's a very, not even suburban, it's old farmland here. But I see more and more building here. And then people are like, oh, there's a bear in my backyard. Well, those are your neighbors. Learn to live with the bears. Learn what are the rules. Then this piece here, this is called No Mo May. And it's basically dandelion rising up after they've bloomed. And I did this piece to commemorate a friend who, in her homeowner society, the lawn men were coming and mowing her lawn, and she had a sign that said "No mow May." He obviously didn't get the and he's mowing down the dandelions. And this 75-year-old woman went out and wrestled this guy.
Oh wow! I mean, it is
his mower So I did this in commemoration of that event. But but I I like beautiful artwork. But for me, I want it to have an impact. I
Mhm.
want people to walk away and think about how what they're doing and how and whether they're hurt. The Dalai Lama said, "Don't if you don't hurt anyone." I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah.
but don't hurt anyone. And if you help everyone you can, but if you can't help them, don't hurt them.
Yeah.
That was more close to what he said. So, you know, I also think that, well, whales in particular, elephants in particular, are sentient beings, and they have a civilization, they have a society. We interrupt their society all the time. We damage their society. Um, it's just not those two, but other animals also.
Yeah.
And, I think we need to step back and stop and think about what we're doing. I remember I was in Tokyo, I think, and I was in the fish market there. And now I have members of my family that will eat anything that swims, not whales, but they love fish. I had to walk away. I couldn't. I said I can't be here. I just can't be here.
Yeah.
So that's the point of that's where my work is. That's where it points at. I want your brain to activate, and I want your heart to thud.